To all the triggered leftists in my comment sections, America's a Christian nation.
All right, let's see it.
Public Law 97-280, October 4th, 1982. Joint resolution authorizing and requesting the President to proclaim 1983 as the year of the Bible.
So we're going to get into the statements that are cited from this joint resolution, but I just wanted to jump in real quick to point out that a joint resolution that is younger than I am is obviously not evidence that supports the claim that America is a Christian nation. And it certainly does not overcome the methodological and the evidentiary gaps and shortcomings that I highlighted in my previous video, which was responding to an earlier video this content creator made claiming that the central principles and ideals that gave structure to the Declaration of Independence, the original state constitutions of the 13 colonies, and the U.S. Constitution all came from the Bible. They didn't. As I pointed out in that video, you cannot even pretend to draw a straight line of influence from any part of the Bible to any part of those documents, because those documents were far more directly and heavily influenced by Enlightenment rationalism and classical republicanism and Whig ideology than by passages from the Bible. That's just pure and utter nonsense. And rather than engage my concerns, this content creator is just going to appeal to this 1982 joint resolution, which is really a symptom of a propaganda campaign begun in the 1970s by folks like Paul Weyrich and Jerry Falwell to try to galvanize the silent majority and gin up a religious right so they could gain more political power. And if you would like a discussion about how Reagan carried on this Christo-fascist campaign, I would highly recommend this book from Rutledge's series, Rutledge Studies in Fascism and the Far Right, Trumping Democracy from Reagan to the Alt-Right, which includes a chapter on the idea that America is a Christian nation and how this is not really the observation or recovery of any kind of actual historical fact. It is more a discursive act, an attempt to reify a reality that would serve the identity politics of the people asserting it. And this is why this content creator cannot provide any actual evidence and cannot engage the concerns with their rhetoric. They can only assert the rhetoric in more creative and different ways, because ultimately what they're doing is not trying to highlight a fact, they're trying to generate a consensus. Because if they can say America is a Christian nation and the majority of people agree, for all intents and purposes, that achieves the goal, because they can't actually make a defensible case that America is a Christian nation. They can only try to recruit consensus to their view, because that is what ultimately serves their identity politics, and whether they are aware of it or not, that is really the goal of all this rhetoric. But before we move on, if you would like actual academic discussions about this idea of America as a Christian nation, here are some things you can look at.
Whereas the Bible, the Word of God, has made a unique contribution in shaping the United States as a distinctive and blessed nation and people, whereas deeply held religious convictions springing from the Holy Scriptures led to the early settlement of our nation.
So there is actually truth to these first two propositions. However, citing them as evidence that the United States of America specifically was founded as a Christian nation is wildly misguided. Because the Puritans who came here and appropriated land from the indigenous populations were absolutely motivated by and influenced by their interpretations of the Bible. They wanted to come here to set up a city on a hill that would be an example of Christian righteousness. They wanted to make a covenant with God so that they would be blessed as a community. They wanted to impose strict moral regulations, and they wanted to engage in social reform in light of their understanding of the one correct way to interpret the Bible. And they wanted the governments to impose those things on the inhabitants of their communities. So they were not here so that they could spread religious liberty. They were here so they could escape persecution from a different sect, and so that they could then set up the exact same kind of dominating theocratic government. And the founding of the United States of America was based quite clearly and explicitly on the rejection of that notion of biblical influence on governance. This is why the U.S. Constitution says no religious tests for office, why it says there will be no law regarding the establishment of religion. So while certainly people were motivated by the Bible to come here and settle, they would have been horrified by the United States Constitution. And the United States Constitution rejected the ideologies that they brought here. So the notion that deeply held religious convictions springing from the Holy Scriptures led to the early settlement of our nation actually constitutes evidence that our nation was founded as a Christian nation is profoundly misguided.
Whereas biblical teachings inspired concepts of civil government that are contained in our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States.
This is entirely and demonstrably false, as I pointed out in my previous video, and this content creator cannot even pretend to defend the notion that there is anything remotely approximating a plausible case to make for a direct line of influence between biblical teachings and what is contained in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States.
Whereas many of our great national leaders, among them Presidents Washington, Jackson, Lincoln, and Wilson, paid tribute to the surpassing influence of the Bible in our country's development, as in the words of President Jackson, that the Bible is the rock on which our republic rests.
So to the degree that it is true Washington paid tribute to the influence of the Bible on the founding of the United States, it would be limited to his endorsement of the widespread Enlightenment era notion that for a people to be moral, they had to have some kind of religious conviction. This is something that was very popular within deism and within the many brands of Christianity that were, to one degree or another, influenced by deism. And so it's not that Washington actually believed the Bible was instrumental in the development of the ideals and the ideologies that structured the founding of the United States of America. It was that he would have endorsed this widespread idea that the American people needed some kind of religious conviction in order to be truly moral, and the Bible was the lowest hanging fruit. Now, when it comes to Lincoln and Wilson, they played no role in the founding of the United States. And so their opinion regarding the role of the Bible in the founding of the United States is not really evidence of anything. Now, when it comes to Jackson, a Democrat and a populist who was riding the wave of sentiment of the Second Great Awakening, this also isn't really evidence regarding the founding of the United States of America. But a bigger problem, and particularly with this quote from Jackson, is that nobody can find an actual source for this quote. The earliest person to ever say anything like this quote comes from this 1868 report of the Freedmen's Aid Society, and particularly from this third report, where in this footnote down at the bottom in this argument about why we need the Bible in public education, this author says, Andrew Jackson, during his last illness, so this would have been in the mid-1840s, pointed a friend to the Bible, remarking, "That book, sir, is the rock upon which our republic rests." That's the first person to ever mention any such quote on the part of Jackson, and nobody has any idea where this author got it from. It's not contained in any writing that can confidently be traced back to Andrew Jackson. So this is a spurious quote. We have no evidence that Andrew Jackson ever said any such thing.
Whereas the history of our nation clearly illustrates the value of voluntarily applying the teachings of the Scriptures in the lives of individuals, families, and societies. Whereas this nation now faces great challenges that will test this nation as it has never been tested before, and whereas renewing our knowledge of and faith in God through Holy Scriptures can strengthen us as a nation and people.
While it is true that our nation faces challenges that will test it, the Bible may actually contribute to our failure to overcome these challenges. But the other two propositions here are not only not supported by the data, they're actually precluded by the data, because any sober examination of the role of the Bible in the history of the United States shows that it does not play a strengthening role. In fact, we can look at things like homophobia in the United States, even today, and see that the Bible is leveraged to hurt vulnerable people. The Bible is leveraged to excuse driving children to take their own lives because of bigotry. We can look at the role of the Bible in anti-vax movements, in fascist movements. We can look at the role of the Bible in anti-science movements that also hurt people. We can look at the role of the Bible in the abolition of slavery, and the fact that both abolitionists and anti-abolitionists both appealed to the Bible as the proof text and the authorization of their positions. And the anti-abolitionists had the far stronger argument for biblical support. See, the Bible doesn't mean anything in and of itself. The Bible has no inherent meaning, it's just a text. Meaning is generated when the Bible is encountered by a reader, a listener, or a viewer in a specific set of social and historical circumstances, in light of the received tradition, in light of their goals for the future. And the meaning that is generated is more directly influenced by those other things, where the Bible just becomes the proof text, the rubber stamp for whatever those identity politics need. So the Bible in and of itself is not an incredible influence. It's really just the signature that is required for whatever influence the identity politics bring to the table. And the sophomoric and naive right-wing authoritarian and social dominance orientation identity politics of this very content creator are a great illustration of the fact that in and of itself the Bible represents more of a liability than an asset to the strength of this nation and its people.
Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled that the President is authorized and requested to designate 1983 as the National Year of the Bible in recognition of both the formative influence the Bible has been for our nation and our national need to study and apply the teachings of the Holy Scriptures. Approved October 4th, 1982. America's a Christian nation.
No, it's not.
Cry about it.
Get even a little educated about this, and then learn to think critically and Google competently. And the fit for this video has been Rogue and Gambit forever.